Hello, if you haven't met me before, I'm Angela Hicks. According to the Math Genealogy Project, at least, I'm Adriana's 32nd student, which is amazing in and of itself. And it's my honor to welcome you here to this memorial seminar for our colleague, Adriano. Well, Adriano leaves behind a remarkable mathematical family, including 36 students and over 200 descendants. I want to point out that we're really fortunate to be joined today also by members of his real world family, including his wife and 3 children. As I was preparing for this, I had the privilege of speaking with several of them about Adriano, and I really appreciated hearing their stories too about the man we share in common. Before we begin, a few acknowledgements. First, my thanks to Doran Zeilberger, whose idea for this event brought us all together. I also want to say thanks to Jim Haglin, Francois Bergeron, and Mike Zabroki, who helped in various ways behind the scenes. And lastly, I really want to thank all of today's speakers who've volunteered their time to speak about Adriano. A few logistical notes. The event is being recorded. I'm also right now adding 2 links to the chat. One is the schedule in case you want to follow along. Ooh, it didn't format quite as I expected. But the second, if you have, many of you reached out wanting to either speak or share photos of Adriano. The second link there is if you'd like to share a photo, I've set up an album where you're welcome to share them, and we'll check them out at the end. So each speaker today will have 4 minutes with a 1-minute transition between. So you'll hear me speak up at the 4-minute mark for everyone to gently remind folks that we need to keep it moving to make sure that everyone has a chance to speak. There will be a short open mic session at 5:40 for anybody who wants to speak up but wasn't scheduled. I anticipate that there's going to be more interest in that than we have time, but the Zoom link will remain open after the hour for anybody who'd like to participate in a more unstructured conversation. So I encourage anybody who can stay behind to join us in raising a glass to Adriano. For those of you who weren't Adriano's graduate students, if you'll indulge me, I'd like to take 1 moment of my time to share just a brief story that's a bit illustrative of what it's like to be a student before we get started. So one day in about my 4th year, maybe as a graduate student, we were sitting at La Jolla Beach doing mathematics, as Adriano often did, and looking around at the beautiful view. He asked out loud, what could be better than math on the beach in La Jolla? He sort of paused for a minute and then answered his own question with math on the beach in Hawaii. So I thought it was kind of a funny comment at the time, but and so we went back to our mathematics, but a day later he comes back and he reports, well, I've spoken to my family, and you and I and Michele are going to Hawaii to do math on the beach. Also, my family is getting a dog. And so it was. Several months later, we had a wonderful week doing math on the beach in Hawaii. And then in the years afterwards, when Adriano reflected on the trip, he'd often have kind of a goofy grin on his face. He'd say something like, it was a great trip, but we still have that dog. I think my family got the better end of the deal. And so to me, as his graduate student, I think today is a good day to reply that, while his family may have gotten a good deal, I think I got the best deal of all. Hawaii was nice, and while the week was extraordinary there, what was really extraordinary is that I had an advisor that was enthusiastic to spend his vacation doing math with me, even his 32nd graduate student, whatever the venue was. So with that, let's go ahead and begin our tribute to Adriano. Without further ado, it's my pleasure to introduce our first speaker, Richard Stanley.
Hey, thank you. So I don't know of anyone who has had as much enthusiasm for math as Adriano. He truly loved doing mathematics just for its own sake for its aesthetic beauty and the joy of discovery. This enthusiasm extended to his entire life. He had a wonderful joie de vivre for all his activities and interests, from bodyboarding to haute cuisine to designing his own home to gathering with friends, among many others. We got along very well because he was a great conversationalist and I am a good listener. One of my main collaborations with Adriano was a joint presentation with Anders Bjorner on Cohen-Macaulay posets at the Symposium on Partially Ordered Sets in Banff in 1981. I brought with me a custom-made T-shirt, with the words Cohen-Macaulay posets. And when Adriano saw it, he got very excited and went into town to have made identical T-shirts for him and Anders. So you will see these shirts in the photos that I am now about to show. If I can get this sharing to work.
You have permission.
Can you see the photo? I mean,
Yes, but it's not enlarged.
do I have to share each one separately? Oh.
I think if you click on one of them, we'll see the larger view of it, Richard.
I enlarged one and clicked, but didn't.
Would you like me to share a bigger view?
Excuse me?
Would you like me to share a bigger view?
Oh, would that help? You can see the small photos here.
Yes.
I don't know what to do. Well, we can just look at these small ones, I guess. It's not as nice.
Would you like me to share them larger, Richard?
Okay. How do I do that?
I can share it from my screen if you like. Here's your first.
All right. What do I do?
We now see the larger one that you were just sharing.
Oh, okay. Okay, so here we are in Banff with our Cohen-Macaulay T-shirts. Here is me and Adriano at the Banff conference on a hike. Some more people on a nice hike in Banff. Curtis Green, Paul Edelman, Anders Bjorner. I think this is Lake Louise in the background. Here is Adriano discussing mathematics with an uninvited participant. I don't know where this is, but Adriano is giving a lecture where he is showing off our T-shirts. I think this is in 1994. Adriano at home in San Diego with his daughter Gabriella, who will be speaking soon. Here's Adriano, Dion, and Gabriella. This is the 1994 meeting in Taormina in honor of Adriano's 65th birthday. This is a meeting at Colorado State University in 1995. You recognize many familiar faces.
No, that's Banff.
Oh, this is Banff?
Yeah, Corbett Hall.
Oh. Oh, I couldn't. Oh, okay. Thank you. Yeah, I looked up. I couldn't remember. I looked up Corbett Hall, and they didn't. It only said Colorado State University, and we did go to a meeting there. Okay. Well, this is Corbett Hall. That makes more sense. But this is Banff. Well, here is Adriano with me in his favorite venue for mathematics. This is on the beach in La Jolla in 2003 in January. This is the conference in honor of Giancarlo Rota's 65th birthday, or 64th birthday, actually, in Cambridge. Adriano is discussing some mathematics with Giancarlo. This is Adriano's office in UCSD in 2011. In 2018, Percy Diaconis and I visited Adriano just a couple of days after his 90th birthday. Adriano cooked a nice Adriano cooked a nice dinner at home for us, and I think Percy is slicing some meat here. This is Hélène Barcelot. And here's another scene from this dinner. This is Claudia Malvenuto, who just accidentally ran into us at the beach that day. And finally, Michelle Wax is presenting Adriano with a signed boogie board at Adriano's 90th birthday conference, which was actually postponed 1 year at UCSD. Okay, so that finishes my photos, and I look forward to the next speakers. Thank you.
Jim, you're up.
Okay, so Adriano inspired a generation of young mathematicians to work on problems in algebraic combinatorics, and many of us who were inspired are here. I first encountered his work when I was in grad school. I was doing work on rook polynomials, and my advisor, Rod Canfield, suggested, oh, you should try putting a Q parameter into these and look at Garcia and Remmel's paper on Q rook theory. And I read that paper and was just amazed at not only the beauty of the identities, but the elegance and captivating nature of the exposition. So when I saw an ad for the AMS session in Knoxville, Tennessee in '93, I just saw Adriano was speaking there, and I decided to go up there. And I remember Nantel was there, and I think Michelle. And he talked about Macdonald polynomials, and I just thought, wow, this is the new frontier. And he also, over lunch, I overheard him talking about you really wish they could find a combinatorial interpretation for the QT Catalan. So I'm going to go to my slides here. Let's see. Oh, God. Lost my slide somehow.
I think you can see them there. They're the first.
Oh, here it is. Oops. Oh, here we go. Oh. Okay, so the QT Catalan was defined by Adriano and Mark Heyman as a sum of certain rational functions in Q and T. And here's the first two examples here for n equal 2 and 3. When you put them on a computer and add them up, they turn out to be these beautiful polynomials with non-negative integer coefficients. And when I went to fast forward to 1998, I spent a year at MIT, and Sarah and Richard both suggested I work on this problem, which was still open. I spent several months on it, but I made the mistake of trying to solve this more general thing called the Frobenius series. I thought that might be easier, but it turned out to be much harder. In fact, we still don't know how to interpret those coefficients. But anyway, then I went to UCSD for a 1-year teaching visitor position a year later, and I decided, okay, I'm going to the heart of the beast, so to speak. I'm going to try this thing again. I got going on a better thing and eventually found a conjectured combinatorial formula for these things. And then I went to Adriano's office, and I showed him this preprint I had written up about it. He goes, oh, I'm an editor for advances, and I can send this directly to the printer, and no one will see it. And in the meantime, we can go down to the beach and work on it and try and prove it. And I went down to the beach, and he started to give me these preprints, all these reprints of all these long articles he had written with Francois and Glenn Tesler and Mark Heyman, full of what are called plothistic symmetric function identities for Macdonald polynomials. And this is one of the ones which we use in the proof of the QT Catalan conjecture. And on the left-hand side is a sum of rational functions, which can be described in terms of McDonald polynomials. On the right-hand side, you got various symmetric functions evaluated at complicated things with different operators. But these identities allow you to basically do calculus with these rational functions. This is part of what Nolan Wallach once called Garcia's weird plethystic universe. But he was a great pioneer, not only inspirational, but he was a very great pioneer of kind of novel research directions, which no one else would have the fortitude to really pursue in detail. But he created just tons of these identities. And he was a master also of manipulating these things, and he was able to pick out identities from different papers, and we eventually were able to prove this result. And then in 2015, Carlson and Mellett found a way to prove a much more general result called the shuffle conjecture by combining these kind of identities with double affine Hecke algebra constructions. And then more recently, Kelly, who's talking later, and the students introduced some more technical operators called theta operators, and we're able to push the subject even further with Marino and Mellett. So I think now this plethystic world of Adriano's has become a very powerful tool, and it may be one of his greatest legacies.
Great.
Thank you.
Thanks. Next up is Nantel.
Okay, so I unmute and I share my screen. Start broadcast. And then I go to here. So as I was preparing for this talk, so one thing I noticed is Adriano has influenced my way of thinking in many ways. And one way to see that, you see, as I was preparing my talk, you probably see on the top there all those tabs. And one of them is right here, Garsia harmonic, orbit harmonics, which, you know, like influenced greatly what I've done with Lucas lately on studying quasi-symmetric, and even more with what I do there. So this is things that I'm working out right now, and it's so in tune with Adriano and how he influenced the way I was thinking. So here is Adriano, the way he visited me at the cottage one summer, so it was really nice. We always, you know, like every time that you have the occasion to go near water, we just sit down and we do mathematics, and that has been fantastic. But one thing is, like, we talk a lot about the mathematics, but I think that in this picture, I really find that after talking about mathematics, the next thing that we do is we cook. So like Richard was saying, it's, you know, like it's a feature that is with Adriano. It's not only we all gather together, and you also learn the same way that you learn mathematics working with him. You also learn some trick of cooking. So here, I remember, you see those plastic bags? This was a trick. Is sometimes when you want to peel tomato or you want to peel piment, so you cook them and then you usually drop them in cold water. But at the beach, we don't have cold water. So the trick here was let's put them in plastic bag, and they will perspirate, and then we can peel them easily. And the trick worked like magic that time. So there's a lot of tricks like that that I've learned with Adriano that perceive now when cooking. Sometimes I'm cooking, I'm too busy. You start the whole pot, and he says, no, you don't have to be on top of the stove steering. You just put everything together and you put it in the oven. It worked marvelously. And then sometimes when you don't have time, you just do that and it worked perfectly. So he had a lot of tricks like this that are marvelous to remember. And so that was, it's a great time. So I think, so here's, and another thing that you see is when you go to those party or those reception and things like that, there's so many math that you see. So here's Jim. He just talked to us about the time that he was starting looking at the Catalan theory with McDonald polynomial and so on. And also about Glenn Tesler. And it's funny because you see Stanbridge is there too, and it's something that much later on I started to do a lot of things with Stanbridge peak algebra. So it's funny that he's there, and then Q-Sure function, no, K-Sure function, not Q-Sure function, K-Sure function. So represented by names is evading me. I hate that. Anyway, lots of nice math.
Jennifer here. Morse.
Jennifer, but there is also in the back Luc Lapointe. You see that crazy face here, Luc Lapointe. And then the stick that you threw through his ears in another picture. We have lots of pictures like that from this party. It was a great party. But another thing that is another place where we do a lot of math, a little bit less informally because we cannot sit, is in hikes. So that's another BAMF conference. There was a lot of nice BAMF conference with Adriano. And another thing that he really liked doing was to walk around and go up in a hike. And it's much more informal than the math that you do during those walk, but it gives you ideas, things to develop later. And that was something that it's even almost platonic. It's like you walk and you just discuss ideas and things like that. And it's very creative. And then later on, you want to sit down and you want to check those computation and check those identity or check those ideas sitting down. So this is something I always appreciate, and I still do whenever I can. Well, that is all. That was my introduction to the next speaker, because she's there. Yeah. Gabriela, she's right here. So she has been around in a lot of math talk, and well, it started really early on. Well, I have her here too. She was in the first picture when they came to to the cottage. She was also in the water. So you kind of see that near water, well, kids would play in the water, and we would do mathematics. And it's something that I always appreciate. And I'm grateful to Adriano for that.
Thank you.
That's it. Thank you.
Gabriela, you're up. Okay.
Oh, I have to stop sharing or?
Yeah, please stop sharing.
There you go.
Hi. Sorry. First, I want to thank you all for including me and my family in today's seminar. It means so much to us. Sorry, you might hear my children in the background. Also want to extend an invitation. We're planning on doing a big memorial with family and everything in the summer. We thought it'd be appropriate to be near the beginning of summer, and hopefully at La Jolla Shores. So more information to come on that. It means so much to us to be able to hear stories and memories of my father from the math community, a community that has been an integral part of not just my father's life, but his family as well. Each one of his children has memories of their childhood filled with interesting mathematicians from across the world, accompanied with, of course, an elaborate and delicious meal and some wine. In fact, one of my earliest and dearest memories of my father occurred at a math conference in Taormina in 1994, I believe. My father had just eaten a fig, and being in awe of how delicious it tasted, he wanted to make sure to share this little piece of heaven with someone he loved. He picked me up in his big arms and offered me the most delicious fruit I'd ever tasted. I look back on that moment and remember how safe and loved I felt, and how much my father wanted to share with everyone the little joys of life. In his final months, Communication became increasingly difficult for him, yet when I spoke to him about this favorite memory of mine, much to my surprise, he also remembered this very moment. A moment that truly exemplified my father as a person. Loving, generous, and full of joie de vivre, or enjoyment for life. I have many memories like the memory in Talmina that evoke the same feelings I remember having in that moment in my father's arms, which are deeply intertwined with the math community. The dinners we had with Francois, I'll always remember him showing us a liqueur that had a fully grown pear inside of it, and I was in complete awe. The times we visited Alain at his beautiful farm in Quebec, swimming at Martel's cabin, Jennifer and Mike coming over for dinner after a beautiful day at the beach. I remember thinking they were so cool. Having a crush on Roberto, the most handsome Italian man I had ever seen, and looking for oysters with Mélisse in France. I could go on and on about the memories I have with my father that I also share with you all. Fully in the moment, filled with generosity and with good food, good company, and pure enjoyment for life. My father loved life and truly lived it to the absolute fullest, still cooking elaborate meals into his 90s and swimming along the coast of La Jolla shores with his fins and, of course, his infamous Speedo. He was passionate about ensuring that those he encountered had the chance to fully embrace and enjoy life. He encouraged each of his children and even his grandchildren to develop an interest in math and college-level academia, and unfortunately, none of us chose that path. In the past, I felt a sense of frustration and disappointment with my father's repeated attempts to convince me that I would find his math beautiful. As I've grown older, I know this was an attempt for my father to share one of his greatest passions in life, his math, and the joy that it brought to him in his day-to-day life. It was so much more than math. It was the life this career was able to provide for not just him, but his entire family. The opportunities to meet people, from all around the world, to travel, to dedicate himself to tenaciously solving equations, to encourage his math students to pursue their dreams, to meeting colleagues at the beach instead of having normal office hours, to being able to live a life that suited him and brought him a sense of fulfillment. That was the beauty of what being a mathematician was to him. And that is what I see reflected in many of his students and colleagues. And even though none of his children have pursued a career in math, we have all pursued a path where we could feel the fulfillment, passion, and joy of life. My brother through his career as a carpenter and teacher, my sister as a talented artist, and me as an ICU nurse. I frequently think of my father when caring for patients. It's reflected in the care I provide, the dedication and hard work, and the commitment to finding the beauty, even in the most difficult moments. The last couple of years of my dad's life were hard. He grew increasingly limited in mobility and started having trouble speaking. He could understand us, but had great trouble conveying what he wanted to say to us. Nonetheless, he carried on with his walker and love of life. He never complained with any new challenge that his aging body would present. He simply would adapt or invent an adaptive way to adjust and maintain his independence. He still found joy in simple moments, from decaf cappuccinos and almond croissants, to watering his favorite fig plant in the backyard, to listening to classical music while riding a stationary bicycle. He found ways to live every single moment to its fullest. In the end, he was no longer afraid of dying. In some ways, he was ready. But he also shared with me that he wished he could live forever, but that it was easier said than done. I loved my father dearly. He was my hero, and there will never be another person like him. My father, the wonderfully quirky, passionate math professor who never combed his hair and liked chewing paper. In the days following my father's death, I decided to impulsively book a cabin on a lake, something I thought my dad would do. a place where I could reflect on my dad's life while also being able to make new memories with my children. Something spectacular happened on one of the first nights we were there. After 8 years of living in Minnesota, I finally saw for the first time the most incredible display of Aurora Borealis, or Northern Lights. Suddenly, I was surrounded by pink and green displays of electromagnetism display, enveloping me in the beauty of this life. In that moment, I knew my papa was there, surrounding me with his love and sharing this little piece of heaven with me again. So in memory of my papa, remember to enjoy life, whether it's your day-to-day of doing math or cooking a meal for a friend or feeling the waves of the ocean crash against your toes. Live life with the joie de vivre that Adriano Garsia so possessed and loved to share with others. Thank you.
Thanks, Gabriella. Sarah, you're up next.
Wow, Gabriella, that was really powerful. Just take a moment to collect my own thoughts after that. So, Gabriella touched on many of the things that I wanted to say too. I met Adriano in 1990. It's 35 years ago. I can't believe it. When I first went to UCSD, and Gabriella was 2 years old, and I just wanted to say after that, she was such a beautiful little girl, and it was absolutely amazing that she could speak French from people around her and then turn to me and speak in English, and never once did she figure out that make the mistake and speak to me in French. She totally understood that I was not going to understand a word of that. It was amazing. When I first met Adriano, I went for a visit, and we walked on the beach at La Jolla Shores and talked about the n factorial conjecture and his way of life in San Diego. Is an interesting introduction to algebraic combinatorics and everything that came after that. And I really found that discussion inspirational. And as inspirational as that was, I've grown to appreciate Adriano more and more with every passing year. I was trying to think of some things to share, and I have 5 things I'd like to say about Adriano that I think should inspire everybody. One of the things I appreciated about him most is the community that he built at UCSD and also around the world of mathematicians who contribute to combinatorics. And the group at UCSD was especially strong right then. We had many, many good people that year. Margaret Shimzono, Arun Ram, Tamsin Whitehead, and Ethan Reiner were all graduating. It was a great year, and I learned so much from all of them. But we also had Ian McDonald come and give a whole quarter class about root systems that year that made a big impact on me. And that was after he'd given his class on Schubert polynomials, which made such a big impact as well. But Adriano absolutely thrived in that community, built that community. It was because of him that this group was so strong. And he said to me one time that you don't need to have collaborators built in wherever you go. You just make your own out of the people you find there. You make collaborators out of your students and your colleagues, and you get them to work on the problems that you're interested in by inspiring them and supporting them. I've tried to emulate his community as well everywhere I go. Number 2, one of the things that's most impressive about Adriano is, of course, his taste in mathematics. He worked on things that made a big impact. His work in analysis is still very highly regarded. His work in algebraic combinatorics has been amazing, absolutely amazing in terms of what it has influenced and the extent to which people both in combinatorics and outside combinatorics have embraced his approach. I mean, the n factorial conjecture inspired so much. And the ring of diagonal harmonics, the shuffle conjecture, so many things that he touched. The Garcia-Heyman modules now, of course, are well-known, nice example of in terms of SN representation theory. Something that I really appreciate is this Garcia-Stanton descent basis for the co-invariant algebra and the Garcia-Procesi modules. I mean, If you look on Wikipedia, there's quite a few things that are named after him. And it's because his taste in mathematics, that's, he chose to work on things which were going to have an impact. Number 3, Adriano really celebrated the people around him, and that helped them to achieve more. And then something that Gabriella just touched on, certainly he was so proud of her being a nurse and Maya's art. And all the students around him say, oh, that work is fantastic. Oh, this is fantastic. This is fantastic. Everything. It's not quite everything was fantastic. That's not quite true. But it was sure a big compliment when you got, oh, that's fantastic. The collaborators, and I'd go to see him and he'd just be so excited about some new breakthrough. But it wasn't just about the math, too. He was excited about his friend Richard and his cooking and his photography. And he was excited about the projects that Dion was working in sociology. And he was excited about everyone who was passionate about what they were doing. And that passion, I think, I'd like to understand, where does passion come from? But I actually think passion might be something that is taught. And Adriano was a supreme teacher of passion.
About 5 minutes there.
Oh, we're almost done. Well, okay, let me say quickly, I really appreciate the way that he embraced life, his enthusiasm, and he never let his limitations get in the way. And I really want to say that how I'm so grateful for how generous Adriano and Dion were in terms of opening up their home and cooking a meal for all of the people who came to visit, the students, the community. He was a fabulous cook, and I'm sorry I didn't get to share my pictures. I'll quickly share this. Is that showing?
Yes.
That's from the fest that we had in 2019, the community there. This is a picture of Adriano cooking, and this is actually my favorite. When he came to visit me and we went to Pike Place Market, we had such a fabulous time, and he was so excited about the fish throwing fishmongers there. And he was excited about every tomato and every fish and stared every one of them in the eye. I can put these on your Dropbox.
Great. So next up is Mike Zabroki. Mike, are you there?
Yes, I'm glad I didn't have to follow Gabriella. I think I would have been in tears. Thank you so much. I wanted to say that Adriano, to me, was extremely demanding and extremely selfish in his attention. He wanted your attention. He took it from you. But in the reverse, he was so generous. He was so generous with his time, with his attention, with his patience, and especially with his family. And I want to share this picture of a trip that we took to Graceland together, Gabriella, Dion, and Adriano and I. And we had such a fantastic time. And I think back at how generous it was that with his passion for mathematics, that I think that was what he taught to his students more than almost anything else. I loved the going to the beach every afternoon and meeting him there, or him picking us up at the campus and taking us down to the beach. And every afternoon we could do math, and often some random mathematician would show up and talk with us and share their experience as well. And I remember the times when I was just not expecting his old students to show, or some other visitor who just happened to be in town. Doing math with us was one of the great things. And so I was so happy doing that. And I wish for some reason that my career doesn't end up being that. I end up doing way too many Zoom meetings. But what I am so happy about is that we got to celebrate his career and life at the meeting in 2019. And so I'm going to share in the chat the site for the pictures and Adriano's cookbook. His cookbook was put together by Diane and Sarah and a few others. And it is one of the great passions of Adriano to have cooked so many great meals with us. And I will say that one of the simple entry points into this cookbook is my favorite. Not sure if I can see this. I'm afraid it's not the front one. I'll just say, go to the cookbook and find the recipe for, not the fish couscous, that's too hard. The lamb couscous, also too hard. But the one that's easy, avocado salad. This is my favorite because it's so simple. It's got 4 ingredients. But once you try a few of the easier recipes, try some of the more advanced ones. They are amazing. After he died, I made a special effort to make the bolognese sauce for some friends at my house, and it was a real treat. It was really a wonderful recipe and a wonderful memory of Adriano. Thank you.
Thanks, Spike. Next up is Michele.
Okay, can I share?
Please do.
All right, so I would just want to share very quickly 3 memories of Adriano. The first one was my first email exchange. So I knew Adriano by fame. So when I arrived at UCSD, I just sent, I was there to do my PhD in algebra, which I did, by the way. I was not an official student of Adriano. But I sent him this email. So, dear Professor Garcia, this is Michele D'Alderio, a new PhD student at UCSD. I did my master thesis with Professor Procesi. I wanted to have more information about your course topics in combinatorics. And that's the reply of Adriano. So it was in Italian, so let me translate it for you. So, dear Michele, let us meet tomorrow morning at La Jolla Shores. I will be next to Tower 32. Here is my phone number. So that was kind of unusual. So I went there and I met Adriano for the first time, and that's where I got my first lecture on representation theory of the symmetric group, symmetric functions, Frobenius characteristics, and all that. A few days later, there was a beginning of the year drink of the department. And so I met Adriano there. He was talking in Italian to Tullio Ceccherini Silberstein, who I met in that occasion as well. And immediately Adriano invited both Tullio and myself to have dinner at his place. And that's a picture from that day. So I helped Adriano to prepare his famous couscous. That was the first dinner and the first couscous of a long series. So the second memory, a few years later, one day Adriano told me, I want to do mathematics in Hawaii. And I said, well, it sounds a good idea, Adriano. Go there and enjoy it. But then he said, but I want you to come with me. And well, I thought he was joking, but by now, you know, Angela spoiled it. So we actually went to Hawaii. The crazy thing is that there was me, Angela, Adriano. There was no conference, no meeting. We just went there to do mathematics. So pretty unusual as well. And the final memory was during the Garcia Fest in 2019. So one night, all the students of Adriano organized a beautiful party for him. And I believe it was the day after, Adriano came to me and told me about the party. He was so happy. And at the same time, invited me to have dinner to his place. That was during the conference. So here is a picture from that day. And that was the last day I had dinner with Adriano. I spent some time with him. And I believe that he invited me to compensate the fact that his adopted student, which would be myself, was not at the party the day before. So lately, actually, I like to say that he finally converted me to algebraic combinatorics, and he sure did. And it was kind of unavoidable, you know. You know, when Adriano wants something, it's just there is no way to say no, right? So thank you. I want to let Marino talk and have his time.
Marino, you're up.
All right. I feel almost a little nervous trying to talk, but I was one of Adriano's last students, and I think because of that, I have a lot of stories about stories. Like he would always tell me stories about things, and some of those stories are, well, first I wanted to say, like, if it wasn't for Adriano, I probably would not be doing mathematics, and I'll mention why in a moment, but what a lot of his stories taught me was that I'm not unique in that, and I'm, you know, very thankful and grateful to be a part of that story of, you know, the number of people that he's helped just get into mathematics and start working on things. So the story I wanted to share was when I was an undergraduate student, I learned about Adriano through my undergraduate thesis advisor, Tony Mendez, who is the student of Remel. And when I graduated, I didn't have a graduate school to go to. So Mendez said, you know, Adriano's teaching an applied algebra course, and I think you'll do well. You should go and take that class. And before that, I had learned about Adriano in his class, and he told us about the story of when he first got invited to the beach. And so he told us all about how he felt kind of funny, and Adriano came waving at him in a Speedos or something, saying, Tony, over here. And so, you know, I always remember that story about the beach. And after talking with Adriano for a while, and talking to him about the stuff I've done, he said, you know, we should go to the beach and do some work. And I thought, yes, I made it to the club. You know, I heard this story. It's real. I'm going. And the first time he takes me, we get into a minor car accident. And so I'll never forget that there's a lot of things that happened. And anyways, that's my story. So I'll never forget that Yaris getting hit on my side of the car. So anyways, that's it.
Thank you. I think next, officially, we have an open mic. We stayed fairly close to the schedule, but we're running a little bit behind. So I'm going to suggest that we go ahead and move on to Greg right now, and there'll be some time at the end for anybody who wants to speak up.
Okay, I'm going to share some slides, which are mostly photos. So let me know if anyone has issues seeing it. But yeah, I'm very moved by having this seminar and hearing all the other speakers. We all have very powerful, similar memories of Adriano, of his generosity and his passion for life and mathematics and cooking and everything in between. I just wanted to show a small glimpse of that today. And the very first time I met Adriano was when I was a prospective graduate student for UC San Diego, and he invited me to his office, which, if you were here for Richard's portion, you saw the picture of his filing cabinets, and he's running from cabinet to cabinet, showing me all these different papers of all this different mathematics I can have in my future. And he's apologizing profusely, like, we would usually meet at the beach, but I had to show you these papers and show you all of these things about heaps and orthogonal polynomials, and what he was thinking about, like, that day, like. But fortunately, we got many times to meet at the beach. And one special memory I have at the beach is I was there with Richard Stanley and Sami Asaf, and I forget if others were there, but when we were in the middle of eating and talking math, a seagull just came and snatched a sandwich right out of Richard Stanley's hands. And it just was such a memorable story. And we kept going, talking mathematics and enjoying the beach experience, but it just, I remember to this day. Um, Jim mentioned about holistic notation and how Adriano had his own way of viewing things. And when I became a student, like McDonald polynomials and then factorial conjecture was very hot. And I asked him, like, what kind of things do you have me to work on? And I was shocked when he said, I have this problem that I thought about a decade or two ago about elliptic curves. I think there's something there that we should just find. And sure enough, like the same way he thinks about Blitzek notations, he was thinking about that there's this like way of seeing polynomials that should come out of these counting functions and number theory and zeta functions, and found like new coefficients that should these mean something. And if I have time, I'll say more about that later, but I'm more saying about the memory of like Adriano's like method to like how he thinks about mathematics. And yeah, he took me also to many trips. Montreal, I got to meet Christophe Rothenauer, Francois Bergeron, and went to conferences like the one on combinatorics on words, which at first didn't sound like it would connect to what I was doing, but sure enough, one way of thinking about the mathematics he was thinking about with me was in terms of deterministic finite automata, and how there's these cyclic languages that zeta functions of cyclic languages should relate to zeta functions of elliptic curves. And I was just inspired by the way Adriano connects these different things. I would still see that at heart, he still had analysis in him. Like he started as an analysis, and even though his passion is algebraic combinatorics, like he still has all these different techniques in his wheelhouse. And again, the community is such a big story with Adriano, like going to FIPSAC and Taormina in San Diego. At the time, like this was many of the older students, but there's many, many more students since then. This was around like 2005, if I'm dating this picture correctly. And I think there's so many more students like Angela, Marino, Dion, others that I'm not remembering all the names off the top of my head. So I just was always impressed with how many like people Adriano like has been able to share his enthusiasm and passions with. So just a few other slides. Graduation, where he was even trying to look for like a fake beard, because this was like one of the few times that he didn't have a beard in 30 years. But we got the picture and the event was great.
That was my fault.
I've heard that story, but I didn't know if it was apocryphal or not. He did tell me, yeah. My daughter said, I wanted to see your face. That's why I wanted for high school graduation. No, but I feel honored that he was able to do that for my graduation as well. So thank you, Gabriella.
Craig, give me about 5 minutes.
And yeah, this quasi-invariance, I'll skip this because I think I'm low on time, but just lots of great pictures and stories with Adriano of our trips.
Thanks, Craig. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, just one other picture I want to share that I noticed after someone shared something. Give me something to share the button. So I saw this was one of the photos at Garcia Fest. Yep, there it is. And I felt I should explain this photo. So can you see this photo? Adriano Garcia is number one. So his passion was to everything and like to his students. And this even was to basketball where we all took this applied algebra class together. I wasn't as good at basketball, so I wasn't on this team, but the team was named Adriano Garcia and won the championship.
Michelle? Michelle, you're up. Michelle, if you're speaking, we can't hear you.
Okay.
That's better.
So
Thank you.
I'm very moved by everyone's talks. So I met Adriano. I'm one of his oldest graduate students here. I first met him in my second year of graduate school in 1974 when I took his real analysis class. He was such an extraordinary teacher that I hoped that I could work with him in analysis. I didn't know that he was transitioning at that time to combinatorics, a field I knew nothing about. I had never even heard of it. Oh, let me put it on full view. Forgot to do that. Full screen. Okay. So that year that I took his real analysis course, Adriano invited me to his office to tell me about some ideas he had on a problem in theoretical computer science. So I worked on his ideas, and when I had a breakthrough on the problem, I was so excited that I went to his office at 10 a.m. to tell him about it. We didn't have email, mobile phones, text messages at that time. So I sat on the floor outside his office and waited for what seemed like hours, waited for him to show up. I had no idea back then that all I had to do was go to the beach and I'd find him right away. Adriano's beach seminars were legendary. He ran amazing indoor seminars too. With this, so I would go back after I graduated in 1977. I would go back to San Diego every summer, and so met all the great mathematicians in the summer in San Diego. So that was one of them. I don't remember for sure if that was 1981, this picture, or 1980. But Adriano also had amazing indoor summer seminars with lecture series given by people like Richard Stanley, Anders Bjorner, Lascaux, Stanton, Vianel, in those years that I went back. In the summer of 1980, Adriano suggested to Anders Bjorner that he show me his ideas for proving a conjecture of Stanley and DiConcini that Brouhaha order is Cohen-Macaulay. Anders and I ended up proving the conjecture through lexicographic shellability. We introduced a new version of it called CL shellability. We had even toyed with the idea of calling it La Jolla shellability, but then we went with CL shellability. This was the beginning of a long-time collaboration with Anders, and I have Adriano to thank for that. We all know how he connects people. He knows who to connect with who. So that was great. So you see the Cohen-Macaulay post set that Richard talked about. Here's the picture that Richard showed. And these are the lecture notes that Anders, Adriano, and Richard wrote for the Banff conference. And these were very influential notes. And this was the Cohen-Macaulay post sets, more generally, post-set topology was an emerging hot topic of interest at that time. And they gave extraordinary lectures on this topic. Adriano's work on the Freely algebra was also very influential. In addition to his work and his student, in addition to him and his students, Helene and Nantel, many other people worked on this topic, including Hanlon, Stanley, Sundaram, Reutenauer, and myself. I spoke on my work on this at the first Garcia Fest in Taormina. And there's this fantastic picture. It was a fantastic conference, and there's a fantastic picture.
In about 5 minutes, Michelle.
I went 5 minutes?
Yep.
Oh my God. Well, anyway, I can't miss. There's Gabriella sitting with my son, Brian. They were inseparable at this meeting. And Adriano was actually jealous of my little 4-year-old. Or was he 3 at the time? I don't remember. They were inseparable, though. And I guess I should stop now. Thank you. I had a couple. Let me just show. Oh, this is the boogie board. The story behind the boogie board is that Adriano had purchased the original Moray boogie board the first year they came out back in 1975. And when I went to the beach, he had this boogie board, and I had to get one too. So I got one the same day, and these things were great. And this is a recent paper that I've written that on the Lie representation that Adriano studied, I don't know how many years ago, have to do the arithmetic. This is dedicated to Adriano.
Thanks, Michelle.
I guess. Thank you.
Prince, while you're up.
Okay, so let me start with saying that I met Adriano something like 45 years ago, and he's the one that got me started to work with other people. You cannot imagine what it was working with Adriano, because he would be so excited about the small ideas that you had to go on. Now, later, I was visiting San Diego, and when I would go there by myself, I would stay at Adriano. And one of my problems was that Adriano would want to start doing math before breakfast. So I was not really awake, jet lag, and Adriano wanted to get started. So one of my strategy that I worked out was to giving a nice formula that I came up with during the night, because I was awake during the night. And then I could get my breakfast, and then we would work all day on nice things. So let me show you the kind of thing I would try to do. So I would, work out the formula. That's a new formula, by the way. And then I would, that's in Adriano style, because there's pletism, there's parking function and all that. And so I would tell him, look, if you consider all parking function associated to any partition, then you can formulate a formula for this in terms of determinant. And we have to prove this. By the way, we do have to prove this. So if some people out there want to prove it, then Adriano would get excited and say, oh, that's very nice, I want to look at this. And then I could have my breakfast for a little while. And by the way, Gian and Gabriella would be really nice to have me there, even if I would grab Adriano out of there. Anyway, so that's the kind of situation that I'd like about Adriano, is great enthusiasm. It taught me enthusiasm as a tool to cooperate. And I know that lots of people out there, I see them smiling because they recognize what I'm talking about. Now, I do have pictures also, but Nantel has stolen a few from me, so I'll just show you some of these pictures. So, by the way, this one Nantel showed you before, but that's what happens with brothers. And and another one he grabbed from me, and and yet another one he grabbed for me. So this was all among it. But that one he didn't grab for me. So that's in Banff at some point. And that's a very nice picture with Angela here and the family. And that's my final picture of Adriano. We were going, I think, to see Richard meeting. And I like very much this picture in the middle of between Montreal and Boston. And that's it for me.
So this concludes the formal program, and at this point we can probably stop the recording. I'll do that in just a second. The Zoom link, however, is going to stay open so that everyone can hang out and share memories less formally.